churches don't do a good job at is when you have new believers, even a lot of times veteran believers, they should all be having to go to like a Bible 101 class. Like, that's okay, let's define this stuff. Let's clarify this stuff. Instead of just letting you go out there through the weeds and hearing things and taking other presumptions and worldviews and mixing them in there and like, okay, no, that's really. In fact, this is one thing I kind of admire about the Lutherans a bit. The Lutherans won't let me take communion with them because I'm not Lutheran because I haven't gone through their classes.
Oh.
So if you don't go through their classes and you don't get confirmed on it, you can come to the service, but they won't give you communion. And they say that when I talk to the pastor over there, he's always like, oh yeah, everybody that comes has to go through this and has to have a course on these aspects of the Bible and understanding this stuff. And then we ask them, do you accept this or not? You know, they really try to define everything that they believe in their doctrine, their catechism, essentially. They still use a catechism. But I mean, I think this is one of the things that, you know, a lot of churches need to do is they need to kind of clarify these things. That's why I like the Bible Project videos too. They really help you understand these terms, because people sit here and they get things crossed, they get confused, they relate certain terms with other terms. There's this, well, is there a difference? Well, wait a minute, now this verse seems like it contradicts this verse. And this is whenever you get people that, skeptics and atheists and all these academics that come out of the woodwork and they sit there and say, well, wait a minute, I thought it said this. And you're like, oh, and you don't know how to defend that. You don't know how to, you know, clarify it. So I'm going to kind of do this right here, because if you don't think these things come up in Revelation, oh, believe me, they come up in Revelation probably more than anywhere else. So I put up there at the top, hell, Hades, Sheol, Abraham's bosom, Gehenna, and Tartarus. What does the Bible say about each? Are they the same thing? If not, what's the difference? So I'm going to kind of go a little fast and furious with this. Again, this is not going to be an extreme in-depth, but it's enough that you can get the idea. And for my sources, it's just a lot of different sources. Encyclopedia Britannica, why not? Simple enough. Looking at some etymology, that's the study of words, especially when they get put into English, where they come from. Looking at different collections of mythology books, looking at different Bible historical books, like church usage of these terms. And so I've kind of just gave you a brief boiled down version of some of those things here. And that's what I'm going to kind of give you an overall idea here, because I think as we go along here with this, it's going to really, I think, hopefully clear up a lot of things when we get through certain parts of Revelation here. So to begin with, let's start with Sheol. So this is kind of a brief or kind of a simple illustration of the Jewish mindset of the world. So what is Sheol? Well, in the Jewish Bible, when they describe sort of the geography of creation in relation to the afterworld, they would always say that Sheol is below the earth. Why? Well, where do we put bodies when they die? In the ground. And above everything is the heavens. We still call them the heavens today, but also literally they believed there are the heavens above. That above us is where God dwells. He's somewhere above us. And where you'll see that there was, if you go back and read Genesis, you will see that pre-flood there was the firmament that basically was the waters above that separated out the waters below, basically the earth from the heavens, the atmosphere. And during the flood, the firmament came raining down hadn't rained before, and the waters below burst up, and so on. But they would also look, as we saw in like the Bible Project video, they made reference to this, but they would look at these things in the celestial sky and use them as illustrations for heavenly beings. So Sheol was basically essentially the realm of the dead. It's where you go when you die. They understood this. Adam and Eve sinned, now you die. Okay. So in the Old Testament, the word Sheol refers to the grave or the abode of the dead. It's where the dead went. And several references here, and I put verses with each of these here. Psalm certainly talks about this quite a few times. And though much of the Old Testament period, it was believed that all went one place, whether human, even animal. And so, throughout this, I mean, you see David using this quite often, talking about Sheol, but you will see it even used in the earliest examples when you go back to Jacob, after his sons brought Joseph's cloak to him in the blood of the animal, and they told him, "Look, Father, look what we have found. Oh, that's Joseph's coat. He's been ripped apart by a wild beast." And he says, "I will forever be in anguish until I go to Sheol." So from the very get-go, they had this idea, well, of course I die, and I go somewhere after I die. Now, this is not to say necessarily that they had a full idea. Even today, we have no full imagery of heaven or of the underworld. We have bits and pieces, but you couldn't sit here and draw me a map of heaven with details like you could of like the United States or whatever. But they understood that you go there, whether you're righteous or wicked. Everybody ends there. Everybody dies, essentially. No one could avoid it. And it was also thought to be down in the lowest parts of the earth. So I'll give you, again, I'll email you guys this too, so if you're trying to copy all the verses down here, but just to know that there are several Old Testament references of this stuff. And if you ever just do even a keyword search in a Bible, online Bible deal, I mean, it's real easy. Just put in Sheol and you'll see a list of them and go through here and read them and see all the descriptions that they put in about it. But for them, it was that. Now, Sheol is a bit of a mystery, kind of, because, well, first, since no one escapes the grave unless God raises them, Sheol is conceived as never ending. The unrighteous who are not raised from Sheol are therefore in a never-ending situation. They are there for all eternity. And you should have noticed that, well, again, I'm going to go quickly through here, but when you go back and read some of these, it seems to have a negative feel to it because certain occurrences speak of the grave, and people don't like to die, obviously. Or it's the place that the wicked are headed to. But you should have also noticed that on occasion the righteous are said to be headed to Sheol. Again, you will see this with several people within the Bible. I just told you about Jacob. He mentions this. David mentions this. I mean, several people mention going there. So it's not necessarily always essentially a bad thing. For a lot of them, they thought it was the place of my fathers. It's where my fathers dwell. And so they always believe that, hey, I will go there and I will see my dead relatives again. I will go be with them. In fact, this is why really a lot of people kind of really see Sheol as really just being nothing more simply than the realm of the dead. Okay? Not necessarily a specific one location, like we're trying to isolate it down to deal, but it's just the overall realm of the dead. Okay? It's nothing. We're going to get to more specific things anyhow. Interesting enough, and you can go ask rabbis this, and you can see this in writings, they would actually bury people with things that they thought they needed in the afterlife. The Jews would do this too. It was not just the Egyptians that did this with their pharaohs, but the Jews thought as well, here are certain things too that they would bury with them. And it seems that basically that an external punishment are not addressed in the Old Testament. After all, there is no real clear passage that speaks of Sheol as being anything like heaven. And it's really never described like we think of hell itself. I mean, you do see certain ideas of it. There's things going on there. But it's not like everybody that went there was in punishment, or everybody in there was just in paradise. Again, it's really just more of, if we just think of it more as the realm of the dead, then it makes it so much easier. Instead of trying to think of it, oh, it's hell, or it's heaven. No. It's just the overall idea is you die, and your spirit goes somewhere. Okay? And so for them, that's it. So, again, we go, but there are actual passages we'll see here where we do have certain promises and certain ideas that there will be a separation. So let's take the heaven idea first here. Notion that the cumulative occurrences of Sheol prove that the Old Testament has no idea of an eternal heaven is misguided. They understood that there is heaven, obviously. Where does God dwell? Where does the angels dwell? They understood that already. They knew this. The reason is the assumption that studying the occurrences of Sheol is the right strategy or trajectory for delivering into the Old Testament of whether the Old Testament teaches there is a blissful afterlife. Basically, essentially, by looking at Sheol, we can see that they all expected to go somewhere to be with God. That was the expectation. If you go back to Eden, we see that even after the cursing, that God promises them a redemption. They understood that there's going to be a fix to all this, but they do have to die. That is just it. You will have to die. There are definite hints that there is something beyond Sheol for the righteous. Normally, so if you look at like Job 7:9, no one comes up out of Sheol as the cloud fades and vanishes, so he goes down to Sheol, does not come up. But the Lord can accomplish this. And if we look at 1 Samuel 2:16, the Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and he raises up. So they understood that everybody dies and you go there, but they understood that God is the one in control of basically separating, of being able to bring something up again to him. So this raise up is a literal translation, and the verb here is not the one typically used for physical deliverance. And so the idea of coming up out of Sheol, basically their idea of underneath the earth, appears to be in this view. This upward language is interesting in light of Proverbs 15:24, where we read, "The path of life leads upward for the prudent, that he may turn away from Sheol beneath." The upward idea is clearly contrasted with Sheol, which is below in Israelite cosmology here. So essentially they recognize that God himself will bring us up out of it. That not only will we one day be restored physically, but before then there will actually be this bringing up out of it. That we will be brought with God. Anytime you go look at the Bible, like if you take Elijah and the bear story, if you're not familiar with that, where Elijah goes down and then the children are mocking him and he calls the bears and they mangle him. Well, if you look at that and he says that he goes up and you go pull up a map, you're like, well, wait a minute. Well, think about it. What direction do we associate with up?
North.
North. But then you're like, well, wait a minute. This location's down here south. That doesn't make sense. Because when you think of the word up, when you're talking about up with Old Testament, even New Testament wording, It's always to go to a place that is considered holy, a location that is part of Yahweh's dominion. And that includes parts of Israel that were worshipers of Yahweh. And they would go down to somewhere that didn't worship Yahweh. And in that story too, Elijah does that because they're essentially mocking Elijah and they're mocking Yahweh. And they're these essentially pagan children, teenagers are doing this. And he's like, oh, fine, here you go. Six the bears on them and they maul them to death. But we should not always represent, and again, this is something we got to get in our minds here. We can't think of just up as going north or just going this way. It's a representation of going to the holy, somewhere holy. The text, so you can read this text sort of two ways here again too, and this is where some people kind of start to deviate and start on different paths here, but that the righteous never go to Sheol, which doesn't seem correct in view of the other passages, or that the righteous wind up there, opposite of Sheol, after death, that at some point, so essentially that, oh, you're going to go here and it's like a waiting room. But let me ask you this, what does that sound like to you? Purgatory, right? Yeah, the Roman Catholics pull off of a lot of this stuff. But I'll get to why that's not necessarily always a great idea. The second option is consistent with the idea that everyone goes to Sheol, but the righteous don't stay there. This is important since many try to argue that all that is in view is deliverance from physical harm that would bring death, and hence a trip to Sheol. So Psalms 3:30, it also seems clearly suggests that the Lord can remove someone from Sheol and raise them up out of the place of the dead. Oh Lord, you have brought up my soul from Sheol. You restored me to life from among those who go down to the pit. And then in Psalm 49:15, it echoes this as well. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. And what's interesting about this verse is the idea of being received by God, which would make little sense if the point was merely protection from harm in this life. The Hebrew word here for receive can also mean taken. So the idea may be removal from Sheol. So the reference to Sheol itself can include the notion of being removed from Sheol, at least for the righteous. But there is more. Some scholars fail to look outside the passages that have the word Sheol in them, and that omission leads to poor conclusions here. So again, if you go kind of do a search of Sheol in there, and these are some of the things you'll come up with. And so building on the idea of the righteous escaping from Sheol at the pleasure of the Lord, we read in Psalm 73 here, nevertheless, I am continually with you. You hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will receive me to glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And there is nothing on earth that I desire beside you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. So essentially, they always had this idea here that, okay, yeah, you die, you go to the realm of the dead. Well, the realm of the dead is a pretty big area, okay? I mean, it includes anywhere that any spirit can go to, okay? That's essentially it. This is kind of like, okay, if I had to draw this like this, let's think of Sheol as being the earth. Okay? That's where all the physical living people are. Okay, unless you're in a spaceship, but we're not going to go there. But, again, you're all here on earth, right? But, now let's really separate things out here. And let's really try to figure out here the separation and how we kind of come to this. Now, Sheol is the Old Testament word for this. But then, around the intertestamental period, when the Greek nation ruled, and that includes Israel, they began to bring in their own language and their own vocabulary. Well, they have a word for this too, this place. It's called Hades. Now, this is going to play an important role too in our discussion tonight as well. But what is Hades? Well, it denotes actually two things here. The term denotes the deity of the underworld, the god of the underworld, but also the abode of the dead. The New Testament use of Hades builds on its Hebrew parallel, Sheol, which was one preferred translation in the Septuagint. The Septuagint, of course, is the Greek translation of the Old Testament books. So, okay, here we go. So, what is the Greek word for the realm of the dead, the world, underworld, the world of the dead? Hades. Okay, we're going to use that. Okay. The Old Testament Sheol refers primarily to death in the abode of the dead, but for both godly and ungodly, these conscious souls face a lethargic existence, apparently without reward or retribution. So essentially, it seems like they go there, but it's kind of just like they're just hanging there. We're waiting on something, okay? What's going on here? And since death is not a natural occurrence, but invaded creation through the fall and Satan's destructive work, we go back to Genesis and we see that that's part of Satan's doing here. The Old Testament personifies Sheol as the power of Satan and his demonic host. While an antagonist, Sheol ultimately exists at Yahweh's service. So it's essentially comes out of Satan's corruption of us, and it's essentially his doing, yet Sheol is still under control of Yahweh. He still controls it. And again, we have too much of this idea. I didn't put it on here. I was going to show you the Tom and Jerry. Well, I can do that real fast. But we have too much of this, and we see this in artwork too. I use this one for the kids. Because I remember seeing this as a kid. Let me see if I can bring it up here. But we have too much of this idea that this is what's going on. Well, folks, that's wrong. Satan is not in control of hell. He's not in control of the underworld. He's not in control of any of it. God is still in control of it all. And so, and believe me, he's just as much in torment as anybody else. He's not walking around having his little pleasure here of torturing people. No. In fact, it's reserved for him and his angels. And we're going to get to that here in a moment too. Peter makes reference to this, and so does Jude. So the Old Testament confidently awaits God's victory over Sheol. But the precise expectation of a bodily resurrection for the wicked and the related conception of Sheol as an intermediate state is late. The New Testament, back in Daniel, so that's kind of the first mentioning of it here in Daniel. The New Testament, this intermediate picture of Sheol in its Greek translation Hades, allowed varying interpretations by intertestamental Jews. In the New Testament, Christ's revelation and Slavic work decisively shape this term. For Christ has established authority over all powers, even the ones who hold the power of death. He is the Lord of both the dead and the living. Again, we give Satan too much credit. He's not. Okay? He's just a yappity little dog. Really. He doesn't have power. He is not the king of whatever you think. He's not. And in fact, he's quite scared of this place. So Hades is the state in which all the dead exist. In the New Testament, all descent to Hades may simply refer to someone's death and disembodiment in space. So whenever they talk about this, they're basically just saying, you're dead. I mean, that's it. They're disembodied, they're spirits now. Their soul has left their body. Okay? Again, I mean, this is where people get a little bit too much. That's mixed some of the mythology of Greek stuff with some of the Christianity stuff, and then you get stuff like the Renaissance where they do this kind of stuff. But really, the term really is still applicable to Sheol. It's just where you go when you die. It's the realm of the dead here. Now we're going to see here too that there is some stuff from the Greek mythology too that kind of correlates quite closely with biblical principles as well. If you're not really familiar with it, we'll get into it here. Following David's prophecy in Psalm 16:10, Peter interprets the resurrection as God delivering Jesus from Hades. Okay, so we see in Acts here this mentioning of this. But again, people get bent out of shape about this, and we're going to talk about this more as well, because people are like, Jesus never went there. Jesus never went to hell. I didn't say hell. I said Hades. Let's not get the two kind of confused here on what their biblical ideas are. He basically rose from the dead. Again, if I sub out Hades for dead, oh, that's all good now. Okay. Similarly, Jesus prophesies that the Son of Man will be delivered from the heart of the earth, just as God delivered Jonah from Hades. I mean, that's his words, not mine. In both instances, Hades refers to a disembodied existence. Again, what had happened to Jesus? He died. What did he do on the third day? He rose from the dead. Okay. Let's talk about this fun little one, Abraham's bosom here. I bring this up because if you want to have some real fun with some theologians, you bring up Abraham's bosom in Luke 16. Everybody's favorite parable. Now, I remember when I was a little kid, and God loved my parents, I asked them this question. Well, so I think Bob said something about people when Jesus died and they go to heaven now and stuff like this. And it kind of spun around my brain, and I said, well, ask my parents this question. Well, what about people in the Old Testament? Where did they go before Jesus died? Well, there's a place called Abraham's bosom. And they were telling me this. I know how they got this. It's from their Sunday school teacher at the time. And I was like, well, what's that? I never heard that before. Well, it's this area that's in, like, it's not hell, but it's like an area where they would go to and they would rest there. And it's like this thing called soul sleep. And I was like, soul sleep? Huh, even at my age, I was still kind of thoughts in my head, so I was like, but I thought there was ghosts and they were like doing stuff. But no. Well, wait a minute though. That don't make sense with some of the other stories in the Bible. And so this misconception of it is that essentially the righteous went to Abraham's bosom. And that's got to be a location. That's got to be a special place. That's got to be a special mountain there that they're not suffering. It's like, oh, we're up here on our little mountain looking down at all you people as you suffer here. Oh, well, wait a minute. We're waiting too long. Okay, God, can we take a nap? Okay, let's take a nap. And you come wake us up whenever Jesus comes and gets us. I'm not kidding you. This is actually a principle that some churches teach. And so you can actually kind of see this imagery. I bring up some of this medieval imagery here to let you know, because if you guys don't know it, art is propaganda. And churches use art to promote ideas. I mean, when you're dealing with centuries of illiteracy rates, high illiteracy rates, okay, let's give them artwork to look at so they can see it. But what happens? It infects your mind. You're like, oh, God is a buff, white-bearded man. He looks like Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments, right? Yeah, that's God. And Jesus, he's the hippie. So what is Abraham's bosom? Well, really it's just refers to a place of comfort. It's a place where the righteous go. It's a place of comfort in Sheol. It's a place of comfort where the righteous dead go to. And they would go there to await Judgment Day. Now the word found in the Greek text for bosom Kolopos means lap or bay. And this relates to the Second Temple period practice of reclining and eating meals in proximity to other guests, the closest of whom physically was said to lie on the bosom of the host. And again, you see this with Jesus, laying down with them, intimacy with them, right? This was a very intimate gathering. I mean, we have too much of this idea of a Western type of table. You know, we see the who's it, Michelangelo or Leonardo? Who painted the Last Supper? Michelangelo. Well, there's several interpretations, but yeah, the one that Da Vinci, or Dan Brown, Da Vinci Code tries to say, oh, look, yeah, that one. But anyhow, yeah, you see this idea of this intimacy with each other. In fact, if you go to the Mideast today, they sit on the floor and they sit around laying with each other. You laid there, you belched to show your satisfaction at the meal. You had a very intimate sort of gathering like this. You ate with your hands. And this is basically it. It's essentially this sort of, again, we've talked about banquet meals in Revelation already. It's this whole idea of being together and having this supper and having this intimate time together. And that's what it really was. It was a place of intimacy here where these people who were your guest would go to. Again, we've talked about who are the guests. We know this already. It was also considered by the Jews of old a mark of special honor and favor for the one to be allowed to lie in the bosom of the master of the feast. And it is by this illustration that they pictured the next world. They saw it as a place of going to be with the Father, to be with Him, to be intimate with God again. They conceived of the reward of the righteous dead as sharing in a banquet given by Abraham, the father of the faithful, and of the highest form of that reward as lying in Abraham's bosom. Interesting note here, I don't want to get off on Luke 16, that's for a whole other class, and I'm not teaching Luke. But, who's Lazarus? Who's Lazarus? Lazarus is the Greek word for the Hebrew word Eleazar. Who's Eleazar? He's Abraham's servant. He was supposed to be heir if Isaac wasn't born. And you see him being welcomed in to Abraham. He was the faithful servant, that he was supposed to be heir to the kingdom. Jesus is not trying to teach, he's not trying to give us really a cosmic geography here. Even though if you read it, people often think, oh, well, Abraham's bosom here, and there's a big Grand Canyon here, and then there's hell over here, right? You read it. When the man's looking, he's looking up. He turns his eyes up towards heaven. And there he is. There they are. Lazarus and Abraham, right? Turns his eyes upward. And it's really kind of an analogy basically saying, like, look, Jesus is just teaching the idea, like, look, they won't listen. They have the prophets. They have these things, and they won't listen to them. They won't listen to somebody who raises from the dead. I mean, it's basically kind of saying, like, look, there's going to be just people who are going to adamantly not believe the gospel. They're not going to believe it. During the Second Temple period, that's roughly 500 to BC to 70 CE, again, I'm going to talk about that. No, I'm not an anti-before Christ person. We'll talk about the time thing later in class too. The concept of a bosom of Abraham first occurs actually in the Jewish papyri that refers to the bosom of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This reflects the belief of Jewish martyrs who died expecting that after our death, in this fashion, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob will receive us, and all our forefathers will praise us. And this is from the 4th Maccabees. So they expected when they died to be welcomed by their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the fathers of Israel, the ones that, started, was God's promise, God's lineage here that he set apart, God's proportioned people. Now the book of Enoch, if you haven't read Enoch yet, you're going to get a lot of ideas about what the Jews thought about this place too. You ever heard of Dante's Inferno?
Yes.
Well, go read Enoch. Enoch does a lot of the same thing, and he lets you clearly know what the Jews thought about this outer world. He clearly points out the sort of imagery of it. And where do these people go, and these people go, and these people go. So the book of Enoch describes travels through the cosmos and divides Sheol into 4 sections: for the truly righteous, the good, the wicked who are punished till they are released at a resurrection, and the wicked that are complete in their transgression, who will not even be granted mercy at the resurrection. So they had a whole idea of this whole thing. And again, the phrase bosom of Abraham occurs only once in the New Testament. And that's in Luke 16 there. So yeah, you go try to hunt it down in the Bible, you're only going to find this occurrence one time. So let's go to our next big favorite one. Hell. Hell, hell, hell. Again, I told you all, hell is actually not in the Bible. Some of you are going to pull out your Bibles and say, right here. No, it's not a Hebrew word. It's not a Greek word. It's not even Aramaic. It's not even Latin. Where does it come from? It comes from us good old Germanic Norsemen. The Norsemen and the Germanic tribes. In hell, there's different ways you can spell hell if you don't realize it. For hundreds of years, spelling was just kind of how you closely thought it sounded. Go look at Shakespeare. Spell, different ways of writing their words in his stuff. But this was the nether word for them. This was the abode of the dead also, but it was also an infernal region, a place of torment for the wicked after death. So for them, they saw hell as essentially that. Now the English word may be also part of this mythology, because there is actually a being called hell, and it's a woman. That sounds about right. In Norse mythology, it's the name of Loki's daughter. Oh, we know Loki. Yeah, Thor. Yeah, Marvel. Yeah. You'd be amazed. My students know Norse mythology from watching Marvel movies. It's Loki's daughter, who was the mating of Loki and a giant. Oh, that sounds like a familiar story from the Bible. Who rules over the evil dead in Nephilim, the lowest part of all worlds. A pagan concept and word fitted to the Christian idiom. In Middle English, also called the limbus patrum, place where the patriarchs, prophets, etc. await the atonement. Used in the King James Version for Old Testament Hebrew Sheol and New Testament Hades. Gehenna, used figuratively for a state of misery, any bad experience, at least since the late 1400s, as an expression of disgust. It was first recorded in the 1670s. This is a picture here, an older sketching of how the Norsemen viewed her and what it was. So, if you can't keep up with what I just said there, essentially it's like this. Now, everybody in here knows the King James Bible is not the first English Bible, right? You have the Bishop's Bible, the Great Bible, the Geneva Bible, okay, Wycliffe, okay. I bring this up, I remember a story, I got a lot of church stories. And the pastor at the time, try not to use names, was up there, and he he actually had a man come speak to us. I think he was a Methodist. He was a scholar and a historian, and he was doing this sort of talk thing. Well, the next Sunday, one of our parishioners wasn't too happy about this guy, and he was kind of going on a thing, and he got up there and he told everybody, and at the very end of his thing, he goes, I want to tell everybody something. There is only one Bible, and that is the King James Bible. And I say the pastor kind of get this. He had this kind of grin thing, like he would make a grin when he wanted to say, like, you idiot, but he knew he shouldn't say anything. He's like, okay, thank you. Go sit down. Well, when the English writers kind of did what the Septuagint writers did. What is this place? Oh, look at the descriptions of this place. What is a place that we know that's like this? Well, of course, English, I gave you a brief history of what English was last class. It comes out of the Anglo-Saxon language. And yes, the Norsemen invaded Britain too, and they brought their stuff. I mean, this is where we get evergreen trees. But anyhow, they're now translating it into English, which is basically a mixing of French and Anglo-Saxon and some other languages. And so when they're trying to write this in English, they're like, well, we don't really use this word. I mean, this is kind of a word here, but what's the word we understand? Hell! Everybody understands hell because that was our old culture. We know what hell is. Yes, yes. We're going to use the word hell. Well, hell's bells, people. The problem with that is, it starts to get people kind of confused here. Now it sounds like, instead of Sheol, instead of Hades, instead of just being the realm of the dead, now everybody goes to a place of torment, right? It's a place where everybody goes and it's just torture, misery, everything like that. And let me tell you what, too, the Roman Catholics, too, were doing their own thing, right? Well, you know what? Because you guys realize that Roman Catholics are kind of still based off of works, right? You got to do these things. And you don't, like The Exorcist, would you like to make a confession before you die? Right? I mean, you've got to confess before you die, or you can't, if you go to die with sins on your soul, oh, and then they would tell people, oh, you're gonna go here, and you need to have us pray for you to get you out. Give us some money though. Go read Canterbury Tales, like the Parsons Tale, and some of these other ones. Yes, give us this money. We'll get you out. We'll get you out. Look at some of their artwork. Well, I should have brought it up, but I don't. There's artwork of this kind of stuff. You see, like, here's God on his throne, and here's the Pope, and here's these bishops and priests, and they're all standing around the Pope, and they're like, and here's some people in this fiery thing burning up, and here's an angel coming down to pull them up. I mean, it's this kind of idea that we get of it. And it's like, literally, where the hell did you come up with that at? But then our good old friend Martin Luther, who the Luthers just love, I mean, they named their whole thing after him, comes along and he's like, whoa, what in the world? What in the world are we doing here? And no, starts to get rid of a lot of this stuff. I would tell you right here, Luther didn't go far enough. Okay. But this is where people get so confused about. Did the people in the Old Testament go to hell? They stayed until Jesus died and came down and got them? Well, let's look here. Here's the Catholic prayer, but they call it the Catholic prayer, but the Lutherans do this too. Let's go through here now. What this was, again, you are an illiterate people. Okay? Let's stop pretending that people had... Guys, Bibles back then cost the equivalent to like $10 million. It took 2 years to write. It was all by hand. And even when they had the printing press, it was still not, that's why Luther came up with catechisms. Just little things with questions and answers so you could have some truthful idea. But they came up with this thing early on in the church of this creed, your confirmation. And believe it or not, Lutherans recite this before their service, and then the pastor gets up there and goes, by the office of me, granted to by God or something, I absolve you of your sins. We'll get into why they do that here in this class too. Because they're confessing to all this stuff. We believe this. So let's go through here. Let's see what we agree with. And what's the thing that's going to cause us to bite our lips and go, I believe in God the Father, Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. Agree with that? Yeah. See, what they're basically doing here is they're going to take all the things that the apostles wrote and condense it down to a really brief summary. And in Jesus Christ, yeah, his only Son, right? Yeah, we agree with that. Only Son, only begotten Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary. So far, so good? Okay. Suffered under Pontius Pilate? Yeah. Was crucified? Yeah. Died? Sure. And was buried? Sure. Oh, he descended into... What's that? Don't say that. On the third day, he arose again from the dead. Oh, good. Yes. Okay. Yes. He ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of God, the Father Almighty. From there, he will come to judge the world, living and the dead. Well, that sounds like Revelation right there. So, it's this little bit right here that a lot of Baptists and a lot of people. I remember the first time I had it. We were doing this at one of the services there at the school, and I was like, I was like, well, catch yourself real quick. Now, is that true? Did Jesus descend into hell? I remember, I'll use his name, I don't care. Rich Dunbar had a little sermon about this whole thing one time, and he gets up and he goes, I'm telling you right here, right now, when Christ was on that cross and he said it is finished, it was finished. It was like, yeah. Can you explain what it is, though, Richard? Because we have a whole book of Revelation here of stuff that still needs to happen. What's the it here that you're talking about? And that's not talking about 1 Peter either. That's not bringing up that verse either. But we'll get to that. But again, this is like this whole deal. Now, really, what is it that they kind of equate to as hell? What's this thing here? Gehenna. This is a picture of it today. Doesn't look like hell to you. Does this look like hell? I don't know. I mean, I hate deserts, but all deserts to me look like hell anyhow. But the word Gehenna is a Greek translation of the Hebrew Gehinnom. I hate trying to say Hebrew. Meaning Valley of Hinnom. This valley south of Jerusalem was where some of the ancient Israelites passed children through the fire. They sacrificed their children there to the Canaanite god Molech. How many of you have ever heard Gehenna before? What have they told you it is? It's a place where they burn their trash. I'm telling you right now, I've done a lot of research on that, and there's a ton of scholars who are like, there's no absolute proof of that. There's no archaeological, there's no recording of it. And it's like they're overlooking the obvious. The Bible clearly, in several places in the Old Testament, point this out. They sacrificed their children there. Go back to Abraham and Isaac. What did God tell Abraham to do with Isaac? Sacrifice him. And as soon as he was about to do it, what did he say? No, I will provide the sacrifice. And in fact, that was a differentiation among Israel from the rest of the world. The rest of the world sacrificed their children. People ask this, well, the Bible says, thou shalt not kill, and here's God telling the Israelites to kill these Canaanites. Well, first off, it does not say kill, it says murder. And the Levitical law differentiates what is what. And do you know why he told them to go in there and to do that? Because those groups would take, I'm trying to remember which god it was, but it's a fat god, looks like a Buddha. He has a big, walk, and they would take their little babies, and they would put their little babies up on that thing, and they would light a fire underneath of it and cook it. And the priest and all the drummers would drum so they could turn out the screams of the baby as it roasted on it. And people said, why did God have the Israelites murder them people for? Well, that's why. Go off on a tangent. I could go off on a tangent right now with this country and abortion. God abhors child sacrifice, and he destroys everybody that's ever done it. Just remember that when we get to tribulation here. You think the United States is exempt from that? One of those children will be on this country. I think there's a special, like my mother, there's a special place in hell for those abortion doctors. Hell? No. No. I get into arguments with Pastor Bershey, the Lutheran pastor, on this. I bring this up. The question usually arises from the King James translation of Acts 2:27 and 31, where they quote Psalm 16, 8 through 11, that the soul of Christ was not left in hell. More popularly, the idea derives from the clause of the Apostles' Creed we just wrote about: Christ descended into hell. Descendet ad inferno in Latin. Hell in both cases refers not to hell of eternal punishment, Gehenna, but to the realm of the dead. Can we all agree that Christ went to the realm of the dead? Okay. I mean, hello, that's not the underworld. Old Testament Sheol, New Testament Hades. Hence, modern translations of both the New Testament and the Creed read Hades, dead or death. Yes, do you realize there is actually other Apostles' Creeds? In fact, you go back and look at some of the early manuscripts, they'll still read Hades. Some say even death. Yes, we can ascend, I mean, we can agree on that. Yes, he rose from the dead. We sing it every Sunday. He arose, hallelujah, he arose. Yes. I mean, I think that they're just missing, and again, this is some sort of cultural wires being crossed. Thank God we have the early manuscripts now. I mean, the Roman Catholics kept them hidden away in vaults, but thank God for the Dead Sea Scrolls. Clear a lot of things up. Oh, now we got the actual, here we go. Here we go with the actual text. I mean, the Roman Catholic Church people did not want people to read. They executed their own priests who tried to translate the Bible from Latin into the native languages that they were teaching. And Luther and them thankfully Luther was German, and the Germans were like, you Italians are not about to take one of our own. So Greek Hades, which occurs 11 times in the Greek Testament, and is always translated hell in the King James Version. So again, I'm not an anti-King James person. They were working with what they had. Don't go thinking I'm telling all of you guys to go throw your King Jameses in the trash and it's like heresy Bible. No. But just understand where it's coming from. And so confusion arises from the fact that Hades can signify, like the Hebrew Sheol, the unseen spirit world, the abode of all the departed, both the righteous and wicked, while hell, at least in the New Testament usage, is a much narrower conception and signifies the state of a place of eternal damnation. New Testament Gehenna, which occurs 12 times in the Greek Testament, is also translated into the English version. I mean, you can even find Bibles too that use both the term hell and Gehenna. Like, Christ is actually using the exact word Gehenna. They leave that alone, but in other places, when the apostles or whoever do it, they're like, oh no, we're going to call this hell. They even try to do it in the Old Testament too. They try to take Old Testament passages and change it from Sheol to hell, or Hades to hell. It's like, what? That Christ is, in his human soul, descended to a place of the dead until his resurrection is clearly stated in the New Testament. He went in there. See, this thing longer than I thought it would. I knew it was going to. But anyhow. But basically, it's to show that he had claimed his victory over death. I died, but guess what? I beat death. We're going to see that tonight in Revelation 2. If we can get to it, if I can shut up here and get to it. But again, this was normal understanding of the descent in the patriarch period, the church fathers, okay, through the see, I'm talking too much and I can't even talk now. Alexandrian fathers included the pagan dead among those whom Christ delivered from Hades. The prevailing view, which became the Orthodox medieval view, was that only believers of the pre-Christian period were recipients and beneficiaries of Christ's preaching in Hades. So I'm going to I'll send this to you again, but yeah, I get kind of off on a rant here about the Apostles' Creed again. But I want to get to this right here. Because I told you the Apostles' Creed is being explained in 3 different ways. Okay. So when they take this, yes, the denominations take this differently, and yes, Baptists too. Some people are like, Baptists have a catechism? Well, not quite, but they do have sort of a professions of faith. They have these, whatever term you want to use, resolutions or whatever. Why do we have these conventions for? It's for all this kind of stuff. Anyhow. So, the first one, it is identical with buried, meaning continuance in the state of death and under the power of death till resurrection. This is your Westminster divines. You guys know what those are?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Presbyterian, Anglican, right? Westminster, Church, Westminster, Okay. Next one, it signifies the intensity of Christ's suffering on the cross, where he tasted the painful hell for all sinners. So basically here, this is your Calvinistic and these type of groups that they basically say, no. What that means is that when Christ was suffering on the cross, all hell was leashed on him. All this hellish suffering and pain was put on him. The third, it is actually harrowing of hell, where Christ, after his crucifixion, appeared to the departed spirits, liberating all the believers from the powers of evil and death. This is your Lutherans. Okay? He went down there and he preached to them, and he brought them out. I didn't make mention on this, but you can go look it up. The Mormons kind of have a similar thing with this too. Guys, you guys realize if you want to learn anything about these churches are not afraid to tell you. They have like YouTube things with their own like Bible project deals, like here's the Mormons and we have 3 heavens, 3 levels of heaven. And hell's only reserved for people that have heard the gospel and rejected it. But there's another level here for people that never got the opportunity to hear it, so it's not fair that they don't get to go. It's like this, all of them have these things, okay? But the question is this, is there a 4th? Yes, there is. This is one that a lot of people, this is one of those ones like, oh, here's Tyler, he watched one too many horror movies or whatever, and he comes up with stuff. Is there a 4th? Now here's a medieval depiction of what they believe here. But can anybody tell me what this is? Does anybody kind of want to take a shot at it? Tartarus. Tartarus. Some of you are like, tartar sauce? No. What's Tartarus? The infernal region of the ancient Greek mythology. The name was originally used for the deepest region of the world, where the lower of the 2 parts of the underworld where the gods locked up their enemies. Who were their enemies? The Titans. Remember the Titans? Remember I was showing you that depiction of the temple of Zeus? The Titans rebelled. Well, who else also rebelled? Who also rebelled? The most English translations say the angels were thrown into hell. The most frequent translation of the Greek word Hades. However, 2 Peter has the angels chained in Tartarus. This is the name of the prison of the divine giants in the classic Greek story Hesiodus, Theogony. See, I talk too much. Theogony. I teach all day, then I come 6 hours of talking to kids. Jewish writers also use this word for the dark and gloomy netherworld. So what's he doing here? Well, for God did not spare his angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them into the chains of gloomy darkness to keep them until judgment. Now again, some of them actually put here Tartarus in the original text. But your King James, that's hell. Go read it again. Tartarus is what it comes. This is the only time when you see Tartarus actually mentioned in the Bible. And we go to Jude here as well, my favorite book, other than Revelation. Why? Because I can read it in like 5 minutes. And the angels who did not stay with their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains of gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. And I'm going to throw this in here too. When Jesus had stepped out on land, so we know this story, right? Let's see if we remember this story. When Jesus had stepped out on land, there met him a man from the city who had demons. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he had not lived in a house but among the tombs. Sounds like some people I know. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" You guys realize those angels and demons that recognized Jesus first for what he was? "I beg you, do not torment me." For he had commanded the unclean spirits to come out of the man. For many times it had seized him, and he was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break free of the bonds and would be driven by the demons into the desert. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion, for many demons have entered him." And they begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. What's the abyss? It's where those other angels are at. It's where those rogue watchers from Genesis 6 were cast down to. You know, the ones that mated with women? Put them down there and locked them up. And believe it or not, they're still down there. He's still going to use them for something here. Kind of as a side note here, this may shock a lot of you. What are demons?
Fallen angels.
Oh, are they? I thought they were locked in Tartarus. We'll get to that. I just like to throw you guys little snippets here. Maybe go try to look up stuff. I mean, you're not quite fully wrong, but you're not quite fully right. It's
I haven't finished the book yet.
which one?
Unseen Realms and the Book of Enoch.
Oh, good. Well, there's another book called Demons. Actually, I think I may have it on the car. You can use it. So ask yourself this question. You may not realize this. Why did Satan quote Psalm 91? Some of you are like, huh? Jesus is out in the desert, right? 40 days? Mm-hmm. What we call Lent. And who comes along but good old buddy Satan, right? Do you realize that when Satan's talking to him, he's actually quoting Psalms? Ask yourself this, why would he quote that psalm to him? I put 2 YouTube videos so you guys can go watch here in a moment. Pretty good stuff. Yeah, that's my good buddy Michael Heiser, if you don't know who that is. I love how he puts these little things on here, these little tidbits that's like clickbait questions. But anyhow. Give you the short passage of it. He takes him up to the mountain. What does he want him to do? Jump! Because does it not say in Psalm 91 that what will happen? They will what?
Catch him.
What's he trying to find out? What's he trying to find out about Jesus? He knows who Jesus is. What's he trying to find out? What is it he wants to know about him being here on earth? Well, let me ask you, does Satan like Jesus? No. What's he want to do? He wants to kill him. Well, if I push you off this mountain, or if you jump off this mountain, are the angels going to come save you? He wants to know, can I kill him? Am I going to be able to kill him or not? Will Jesus give in to it? No. Just throws it right back at him. I'm not going to let you know. Because think about it. If Satan knows he can't kill Satan knows he can't kill Jesus, I got to find another way, right? What does Jesus want? What's the whole thing here? I've got to die. He tells them all the time, I've got to die. I've got to die, Peter. Get thee behind me, Satan. I've got to die. And who were the spirits in prison? Well, there's another video there you can read about. But essentially, I'll give you the little cliff notes. He's going down there, and to give you a very crude imagery, he's giving the middle finger to all of them. You thought you could beat me? Guess what? You couldn't. You couldn't. Your other little buddy that's roaming the earth there, Satan, he tried it. Guess what? You failed. He failed. He's going down there to mock them. I have power over life and death. We often have this idea that we equate angels with Yahweh, like they just know so much. Now, does Satan know more than we do? Yes, he does. He's been around a lot longer. He knows how to screw with us. But they are not Yahweh, people. They are limited knowledge. They're really kind of like humans. They've just been around a long time. They have experience. But guess what? They don't know how to deal with this. And in fact, even when God's telegraphing the whole playbook, Revelation, they still don't believe it. And he's basically telling them in Revelation, guys, if you haven't figured it out by now, here's what's going to happen, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's what's going on here. He's basically going down, you thought you got me? Yeah, oh yeah, you killed my body. Guess what? That was the plan. See ya. You're still chained down here. I'm going back. And I'm going to sit on the right hand of my Father. Because I have authority. Not you. So I hope this clarifies a lot of this stuff for you guys when we talk about this next bit here. Alright, so now for tonight's lesson, if that wasn't enough. Oh, again, I'll send you guys this too if you want to look it over and play the Google game and try to, I don't know, catch me on something. That's alright. Well, see here it says this. Well, okay, let's talk about that. Anyhow, let's go to Revelation 3, verse 7. If you recall, on the first class I excluded Revelations 1, 17, and 18 because I said I was going to hold off on it, and it's because it goes right along with this right here. And I made slides tonight too to really help you guys out with all this stuff. So I'm going to loop these things in here together. So I'm just going to start by reading the passage here. And we're going to try to finish up the churches tonight too. But anyhow. And to the angel of the church of Philadelphia write the words of the Holy One, the true One, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. I'm looping this back in again because it's keys of David, this other key now from earlier. So back to Revelation 1, 17 and 18. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead, but he laid his right hand on me, saying, Fear not, I am the first and the last, the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades. So here we have the keys of David, now we have the keys of death and Hades. Well, let's go dive into it. For tonight's class, I decided to put these up here if you're interested in reading them. These are some of the sources here that I've looked over to find information on this. This is the one, it's titled, it's a dissertation, this is his dissertation here. It's Justin Bass's book, The Battle for the Keys. Again, I'll send this stuff to you guys too afterwards. And the second book also is from David on Apocalypticism to me symbols. Prophecy and magic in early Christianity. Some of you are like, magic? Yes, the Bible, trust me, the Bible does say magic's real. There's a reason why the Israelites were supposed to kick out all the seers and necromancers and all those people. And here's Saul. Find me one. So the phrase, I have the keys of death. Okay, well, yeah. So I kind of put some notes up here. This is not everything I'm saying, but just kind of did. So those are the sources here, again, for this. So this phrase here, the phrase, I have the keys of death and Hades, refers to the cosmic sovereignty to which Jesus has attained following the act of God raising him from the dead. All three elements are featured in the brief description of the Lamb in Revelation 5:6, which we haven't got to yet, but we will, which was standing as though slain, with 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into the earth. Here, standing refers to the fact that he is now living. In other words, he's not lying dead. You understand, standing means you're alive, lying means you're dead. Despite the fact that he was slain, and the 7 eyes, understood as the 7 spirits of God sent out into the earth, is a symbolic way of emphasizing the sovereignty of Jesus Christ, who is the Lamb. Now, we talked a bit about the eyes of the Lord, again, going to and fro a bit, and how it denotes God's oversight of everything, his sovereignty over it all. So that's familiar, but here the language of Revelation 5 transferred to the Lamb who was slain, but it is now standing. And again, that language harkens back to, again, Revelation here. Now, there is a bit of a grammatical issue here, if you know Greek, which I'm not a Greek expert, but I had to look at this in a Greek text thing here to understand it, but I know my English. That On points out this here, and he writes on this here that the prophetic call narrative of Revelation 1, 9 through 20 is a complex pastiche. That's essentially a word that's where you mimic something, but you're not trying to make fun of it. You're just imitating it. It's the opposite of parody. Of imagery drawn from various sources, a supernatural revealer like a son of man appears to John and claims to possess the keys of death and Hades. The genitives, again, oh, Sharon's not here. I can't pick on her, ask her if she knows what those are. Tu thanu tu and tu hadu could either be objective or possessive genitives. And I'll explain what that means if you forgot your grammar class. But essentially, genitives is a grammatical term for the relationship of two nouns that follow each other, or an article, that's your a, and, and the, plus a noun. So for those of you, again, that don't know Greek or you forgot your grammar classes in English, you know right away that we're talking, what we're talking about here is this, but there are different ways to understand the relationship of the nouns here. And so I'm going to kind of really break this down here for you. If they are regarded as objective genitives, death and Hades must be understood spatially. So essentially it's a location, okay? It's just a realm, it's an area. But if they are construed as possessive genitives, death and Hades must be understood as personifications. What's personifications? That's where you give a non-human things human qualities. Now, this is not exactly, some of you are going to go, oh geez, what's this now? Another, here goes Tyler with this supernatural whatever stuff. But we're going to see here that there's actually pretty good arguments for death actually being an actual thing.
Well, Jesus defeated death.
Well, we're going to get it, yeah, thank you. Trust me, there's about like hundreds of verses, really. The first possibility is preferable since death is never, at least to again, this is to Bill Bass's knowledge, described in ancient texts as possessing keys. And there are a few, if any, ancient texts in which Hades is also described. Pausanias describes a decorated table showing Plutos. Again, Plutos is the Roman name for Hades. You know, the planets are all named after Roman. Anyhow, holding a key, but the same text distinguishes him from Hades, whom he has locked up. If you're kind of curious about some of this stuff here with it, this is the book here that has some pretty good writings about talking about the usage of descriptions of the Greek mythology and its incorporation of its terms within the Bible. And another fun one is the Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible. I know it sounds like something you roll out if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. But anyhow, this is actually, I'm telling you right now, if you really want to do it, get some of these dictionaries and some of these things like this. I mean, it's very fascinating to understand these words, these etymologies, and these usages, and where they come from, and all these types of things like that. That's my teacher talk there. Use a dictionary. Anyhow, so On is basically saying, well, he drifts away from the personification view. Now, I think that's necessary to agree, and what we're going to do through this here is basically going back, and we're going to kind of look at how maybe On is wrong here on some bits of this, but how he's also right here, and we're also going to throw Bass in here as the counter argument. So I'm taking these two guys here, and I'm going to juxtapose them here with their arguments for you. And so, if you can't already tell, I kind of favor the personification a little bit. Okay. But Bass argues at length for it, and he has very good reasons for doing this, and I'm going to go through them. So let's start with the Old Testament here, and the question, are death and Hades ever personified? Are they ever portrayed as figures, entities, deities elsewhere, especially in the Old Testament, or in the literature that informs the usage of in the Old Testament? Are they, I mean, where do we see this at anyhow? And so, in referring to this DDD book, I'll just shorten it to that, John Heasley gives you us a kind of a good survey here, a good background of Old Testament material that deals with this, the word death and its usages and where it and some of these type of deals. The noun usage of death is actually in Hebrew mot, and that is the same word used in the Ugaritic. That's the group of Jewish writers in a region. And the Ugaritic mot is a deity. So this is going to be the backdrop for the Old Testament use in certain passages of the term mot or death. But first we've got to use the background material. So this is from Healy here. Mot's absence from the Ugaritic cult and personal name suggests that he was not a deity worshipped like others in the pantheon. So when you go to these other Canaanite cultures here, they had a pantheon of gods, and of course the Greeks as well. But there's no really evidence of showing any kind of group that actually worshipped him, that they had sort of a cult or anything like that. We see this in other groups that we're going to talk about. But in the Ugaritic mythology, Mot is one of the main enemies of, who's that person? We know this one, Baal. Along with other ones here, Yam and stuff like that. He, Mot, becomes Baal, or overcomes Baal, I'm sorry, and is later has to descend into Mot's underworld domain. Baal revives, and the two protagonists fight. Eventually, Mot is forced to concede, at least temporarily. The details are, of course, far from certain. The main characteristic of Mot is that he is a voracious consumer of gods and men. So we really don't have kind of a clear picture of his imagery. Okay, there's not really like a carved image we can necessarily look for, but we have descriptions of him. So he's a consumer of gods and men. He has an enormous mouth and an appetite to match. In his voraciousness, Mot is closely associated with the underworld. Mot dwells in the underworld, which is an unpleasant, muddy place of decay and destruction. The role of Mot is a demonic force to be held in check. It is well illustrated. Although there is no certain iconic, I already mentioned this, there's no imagery of him. Such suggests that he has been involved in images of gods or demons carrying a scepter. So basically implying that he has some sort of rulership here. In Old Testament poetry, death is often personified as well. Go to Hosea 13:14. I shall ransom them from the power of Sheol. I shall redeem them from death. O death, where are your plagues? O Sheol, where is your sting? Compassion is hidden from my eyes. So here, this also echoes later on Paul's own writing, where Paul says, O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is your victory? So Paul's reiterating this here as well from Hosea. In that death and the underworld here are portrayed as entities that can be spoken to. And, in other words, in other texts, there is mention of specific characteristics of death which have some sort of parallel in the picture of Mot painted in the Ugaritic text. So we're going to see kind of a similarity here between the other Canaanite cultures of what death is, along with the biblical illustrations of death. And again, in Habakkuk 2:5, the insatiability of the personified death is mentioned, whose greed is as wide as Sheol, and like death, he is never satisfied. So again, he has this mouth that's always consuming, always eating. It's never satisfied. And this may be echoed in the background culture tradition of Mot. But the comparison is with the insatiability of the arrogant man and does not directly touch on matters religious. The same idea, though, applied to the personified Sheol is found in Isaiah 5:14. Therefore Sheol has enlarged its appetite and opened its mouth beyond measure. So we see here that the Bible writers are again giving this sort of human quality to this inanimate object. And it begs the question again, is it an actual thing or is it just a location? Well, I mean, so far you can see a lot of it here. They're kind of giving it all these personifications, showing that it could actually be an actual thing. I mean, if we go back to Genesis, we see about this, and death entered the world. Okay, well, where's this coming from? All of a sudden, now we got death on the scene. And if you ever read, anybody here ever read Milton's Paradise Lost? Yeah, he always portrays death as a real being. And, yeah, but anyhow. Again, so let's see here. But this point is that the Old Testament, okay, so let me just kind of skip here, so I don't want to reiterate, so we can keep going. They never get to experience what in terms of the Old Testament is written in the Old Testament. Now, that doesn't mean that we've got soul sleep again, or anything like that. Again, this whole idea of soul sleep is complete nonsense. I can give you, if you want me to, some arguments on that later. Because there are these expressions of hope. I'm going to be with my fathers, buried with my fathers. These are all expressions used in the Old Testament. And you know, we're going, and we know this from archaeology, because when we look at, again, I made mention of this too, that many of them, the Jews would actually bury them with certain possessions, the dead bodies with them. And they believed that they would go there with their family and be with them. But again, but in case it's not, I just want to little again about this deliverance from Sheol. There's these two exceptions here. What are the two exceptions in the Bible of people not going to necessarily? Well, I'm trying. Sheol, yeah. Enoch and Elijah. They were taken where? Yeah, to be with God, right? To walk with God. Anyhow, I'm almost jumping the shark here, but begs the kind of question: how did they get to go and nobody else? I mean, this is before Christ rose, right? Whoa, wait a minute! All of a sudden, God's making exceptions to the rules here. Look at that. Just keep that in the back of your mind here. But anyhow, there's hope that you will get out on the last day, okay? I mean, the Old Testament Jews, we already talked about this, they always had this hope of being with the Lord. They understood this, okay? The idea of somehow being just isolated or being away from God was not true to them. They understood that they would be with them, and they would be with their fathers. They would be with them. Again, there's also, Jesus even mentions this idea, the first fruits of them who sleep. I mean, these are phrases that actually mean something in the context of the Hebrew Bible, and just how this whole idea subject is thought about. So this idea here that being gathered to one's fathers is parallel with Sheol. If being gathered to one's father and sleeping with your father, I know that kind of sounds a bit perverted, but you know what I mean, is parallel with Sheol, then it is clear that the righteous went to Sheol. Okay, yeah, but is that heaven? Is that heaven? I don't know. I mean, that's what we want to know. Okay, yeah, we go to the realm of the dead. Yeah, you die, you go to the realm of the dead. Woo, that was a stretch. Huh? Oh, Jimmy Christmas. Okay. Well, we're going to say this. But anyhow, many see the personified figure as Moth, the Canaanite god from Ugaritic texts with similar characteristics to death in the Old Testament to illustrate death. So, there's a whole list here. He uses waves of the sea against victims, cord and snares, ascends through windows, kills, terrorizes, consumes, is never satisfied, crushes, speaks, shepherds or has people under his ownership, is the enemy of man, has weapons, is sent by God, meets people, can be called upon. All those right there show that, give it some sort of a thing that it's being controlled, that it's an actual being here. Those are all passages that argue for it. Similar, Sheol, Hades is predominantly the realm of the underworld, but it also can be personified as being, though, thought to unleash terror. Sheol and Hades is personified as well throughout the Old Testament. Seizing his victims, never being satisfied, in insatiable power, terrorizes with weapons, has a house, has a hand, has a belly, has a mouth to feed on its victims, can be embittered, can make a covenant, is naked before God. So, I mean, they're not afraid here to make it seem like it's an actual living being to them. Well, let's think about this. What is that thing that came around and killed the firstborn of the Egyptians?
Angel of death.
Angel of death. Maybe. And again, this is kind of a medieval imagery of death and sort of the ideas taken from this oven. You can see it's consuming and stuff like that to get this idea. Oh, I'm not going to get to this though. Okay. But, that's okay. But anyhow, boy, this time went fast today. I talked too much about health. That's okay. I'll send this to you and let you guys look it over here. And maybe that way I won't have so much, we can go quickly on it the next time. But again, I put a lot of these illustrations in here. But again, yeah, see, I got a whole lot. That's okay. But I'll leave you with this little bit here. Before the foundations of the world, Christ died for us. What does that tell you? Does it sound like you had to wait somewhere? If you believed? How did Enoch and Elijah just get to go? So yeah, we'll pick that up and we'll finish up. Hopefully I'll send this to you guys and you can read over it and we'll just speed through it. Because I really want to get to the... Oh, by the way, Joey told me that we're not having class next week. It says it's fall break and I was like, I didn't realize church has got a fall break, but that's okay.
Pumpkin Fest prep. That's what it is.
Oh, okay.
Come on up.
Gotta be finished
I'll
off.
hand you things.
Yeah, but I'll send you those tonight and you should watch those 2 YouTube videos. I'll caution you, YouTube can be its own abyss. So you go for other things and videos, and boy, you want to find out about everybody's deal, get on YouTube and you find all the different ideas on hell and everything else.
There's also a wedding next